Hello, everyone. This is Rick, and welcome to Astral Club. This is Astral Rescue from Oceana. Before we get started, just want to mention Patreon, and we have a new Patreon supporter, Viper-Trent, and he is of the Astral Ascended level, and I'd like to thank him very much for becoming a member of Patreon. If you'd like to join him, you get no commercial advanced videos on Sunday, and there's an email where we can talk back and forth. You can share your experiences, ask questions, and we can just generally talk. If you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. Next up, private lessons. If you're interested in a private astral projection lesson with me to begin astral projecting, or just to sharpen up your current projection skills and widen your horizons a little bit, be glad to work with you. If you want more information, there'll be a link in the description. As you recall, I've been doing a variety of projections right now, kind of going back to my old ways, even before I got involved with Astral Guide School. And it's been very enlightening, and I've enjoyed a lot of these projections. But I also know that I was putting off something I needed to discuss, something I needed to do. So I homed in on my angel's vibratory rate, and went to his ident, and he was already there waiting for me in that little conference room. It's like he was expecting me. And so we kind of greeted one another, and he said, "It's nice to see you again," and those kind of pleasantries, which he's kind of learned, I think, from some association with me, and who knows, perhaps some other humans too. I don't know. And I got right to the point. I said to him, "I've been thinking that I need to try to do a rescue attempt for my friends. The monk sacrificed himself to save us all, and now he's trapped around that ultramassive black hole. I'd also like to try to rescue the Virgin. I know he betrayed us, but I have to believe that there's still some good in him, and so I'd like to attempt to rescue him from Oceana, that water planet that's vibrating very lowly, and it's just filled with violence and hatred. And I'd like your blessing to attempt those rescues." He just was silent for a minute and just looked deeply in my eyes, and I could see just how concerned he was, how sympathetic he was. He really has loosened up over the years. But sadly, he looked at me and he said, "Rescuing the monk is out of the question. It's insanely dangerous. He is currently trapped with the master around that ultra massive black hole. It's impossible to rescue him." He just paused for a minute and looked at me. And I didn't say anything. I didn't even think anything, but he knew how I'd react. I guess he knows me well enough now. He goes, "I know you would like to try anyway, even though it's madness. But remember, it's not just your well-being that you'll be risking. You'll also be risking the well-being of the entire universe. If you free the monk and the master gets free as well, even if that's somehow possible, you risk the entire universe, and I cannot allow that." I allowed that to sink in. I mean, there's always that part of me that wants to rebel, but I'm not so insane that I'd not only be willing to risk myself, but all intelligent life in the universe. So I accepted that defeat, at least for now. I said, "Well, then what about the Virgin?" He said, "Well, that's going to be extremely difficult and also highly dangerous, albeit if it's not as insanely dangerous as trying to rescue the monk. He said, you realize that if you sink into the hatred, despair, and fear of that planet's reincarnation cycle, not even I will be able to rescue you before you've gone through the cycle. And who knows how many hundreds or thousands of lifetimes that could be. So you need to be aware of that risk as well. I thought about it, but I said, I know the Virgin betrayed us. He betrayed the monk, he betrayed our cause, he betrayed me. But he was once a friend. And I just feel that I owe it to him on some level to try to retrieve him, to rescue him from that watery hell that he's currently existing in. My angel looked very sad, but he also knew that this was something that he couldn't dissuade me from. So all he could say is, please be cautious and remember at all times to keep your vibratory level high. It's going to be like, maintaining a house in a hyper hurricane. And you're going to have to try to maintain your emotional equilibrium, because if you get knocked too far off of that equilibrium, you're going to fall right into that pit and you'll be sucked right into that reincarnation cycle. And who knows when we'll be able to free you again. I said, I understand. With that, he wished me well and I left. I took some time to kind of meditate a little bit in the astral. It's a lot easier in the astral because you don't have that physical body disturbing you with its various sounds and needs. So I got myself nice and centered. I thought about, very positive, loving thoughts. And then I caught the ident of that ocean planet, which I, not very inventively, named Oceana, guilty as charged. But I zoomed in on that ident, and before I knew it, after I regained consciousness, I was in orbit around this ocean world. You could sense, even from orbit, just the chaos and the negative emotions that were just spilling off of this world. It was, I don't know, it was like bathing in the most disgusting sewage that you could possibly imagine, like drowning in a sewer. That's what it felt like. And just above, just orbiting there, I had to constantly reinforce my vibratory level to not allow myself to sink down to that level. Once I felt that I had established a good amount of protective shell around me with my higher vibratory rate, I started to scan the planet looking for the Virgin's ident. Now I knew it pretty darn well, just like I knew the monk's ident. Friends usually have a really good ident for them. And once again, for anybody new, ident is essentially the way you locate a familiar person, place, or even thing in certain instances, where once you have that ident or that address of that person, place, or thing, you can seek it out in the astral and then project to it. Well, I spent a good amount of time trying to find the Virgin, and it was difficult. I finally detected what you might call a hint of the Virgin. It's kind of like the equivalent. Have you ever I mean, I know a lot of you haven't been out of college for very long, but I've been out now for over 30 some years. So if I look at a, let's say, Facebook picture of someone I knew in college, they've changed quite a bit. So you really have to look at that picture and kind of contrast it with the picture you still have in your head of when they were 20 years old, and then make that identification that, oh, yes, this is that person. So it's like that. It's like, yes, that's the person, that's their ident, but it's changed over a period of time. So it's not as familiar to you as it once was. And it was the same case here with the Virgin. So I think that I found the right one because I got the hint of it. And I immediately projected myself down into the water and the depths of that particular planet. I probably went down somewhere about 100 feet and was looking about to see if I could locate exactly where the Virgin was. And eventually I found him, so I traveled further into the water. I guess he must have moved since I located him. And there I found him. And he was involved with, well, I guess you might call it kind of a village. I mean, if you're thinking of mud huts and all that kind of stuff, you're way overthinking it. Essentially what it was a group of nests that had been built up with various versions of seaweed and other things that I guess were essentially breeding grounds. And he was there with what I believe was a female, and they were guarding eggs. And they weren't the only ones. There was this huge grouping of these. They look kind of squid-like, that was their basic body type. They had two eyes, and they had a number of tentacles, but two of them tended to be extra ambidextrous, and they seemed to be thicker, and they would use them more like we might use our arms. And what I think was, what I believe was the Virgin, he was there guarding this nest along with his mate. And he had one of those barbs with him that I had seen previously, that I had found out was a barb that had been attached to another creature that lives on that planet. Apparently, these squid creatures harvest these natural harpoons off of these creatures, which I guess we might loosely associate with a horseshoe crab type being, type creature. And they use these things as we might use a spear. So he was there guarding this nesting area along with a wide variety of other couples. And as I watched, I was about to approach, I guess, the Virgin, or what was left of him, when suddenly there was a massive attack. Other squid creatures, which looked pretty much the same to me, but they came swimming in from the shallower water, diving down and attacking the nesting areas. And there was a huge battle. And there was all sorts of bodily fluids leaking out into the ocean. I sensed a huge amount of hatred and fierce attitudes and fighting, hatred. It just was, the violence was so intense. I had to center myself in the middle of watching all of this because I could feel myself being drawn down to a lower level because of all of this awful activity that was going on around me. These eggs were being destroyed. Creatures were dying on both sides, but it seemed like the nesting folks were getting the worst of it. I kind of lost the Virgin in the battle, but as soon as it started, it kind of ended. And it looked like the enemy had retreated or left in victory. I couldn't tell which. And then I realized that I could sense the ident of the Virgin a little bit clearer now because he had left his body. He evidently had been killed in that raid on the nesting ground. So I went to his spirit, and at first he couldn't even see me, and he was still raging to himself. He was already plotting about how he was going to kill the enemy and how he was going to destroy their nesting ground next time. And so I had actually risk lowering my vibratory rate just so he could notice me. And when I finally did that and I realized that I was on the verge of falling into a deep pit, which I knew I wouldn't be able to emerge from, finally he noticed me. And for a second or two, I saw recognition in his eyes. And he even said, "Rick?" And then I just suddenly brightened up and I said, "Yes, it's me. I'm here. I'm here to take you away from this. I'm here to save you." But just as quickly as that light came on, it went off again. And he just looked through me and he said, "Next time, I'm going to lead a raid. We're going to destroy their nesting site. We're going to take their food and we're going to capture their females. And we will gain revenge for this unprovoked evil attack." And I tried talking to him. I said, "Look, Rick, look, Vert, I'm here. I'm here. It's me, Rick. I'm here to take you away from this. Please listen to me." But it was he just looked right through me. He didn't hear a word I said, or if he did, he didn't notice it. He didn't indicate. All I got coming off him was hatred, revenge. And then I started feeling myself being pulled down. And it was just this oddest feeling, like your intelligence was leaving you, and you were being emptied, but being filled with all of these blind feelings of hatred, and I had to just quickly leave and shoot out away from that planet. And once I was in space, far away from that planet, I was able to, in essence, take deep breaths and to get myself re-centered, because I had been so close to being sucked into that hellish cycle of killing and death and revenge and rinse and repeat. At that stage of the game, I had to exceed defeat. I just didn't know what I could do, and I had to leave my old friend, the Virgin, once again trapped in that reincarnation cycle. I couldn't help but feel a little guilty, and once again, a deep sadness for a friend that I just could not retrieve. Well, I returned to my body then. If you found that experience interesting, please hit the like button, share it with those of like minds. Subscribe if you haven't already, and many of you have, of course. Make sure that bell's on so you get notified when the Wednesday afternoon and the Saturday morning episodes are released. And please, I want to hear your questions and your comments. What do you think of what I tried? Was it smart? Was it foolhardy? Anything you've got to say, I'd be interested in. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.